Okay guys, since we have understood how the materials are made right out of textures, we're gonna move ahead actually and make our material which we created the underscore floor to be a master material. Now some information about the master material is that let's say you have a lot of different 3D assets, and these assets are not actually being textured when you're going to import them. So there are no materials for them as well, or the materials are there but the textures are not created for that. So having a master material will allow us to bring about any different asset as a 3D asset from outside from in Unreal Engine, import it, and use the master material to basically apply the textures rather than creating all these textures which we have in the material from starting. So it's kind of an automated process. You can just take the material and just apply different textures. To do this, I will take you with an example, but before going into the example, let's try to do some changes for our m underscore floor material. We'll go back, just save it as in the case if it's asking you. Go to the content folder. Here do we find our material, and we click on, and we have it here in our drawer, m underscore floor. So let's rename it. Right click and rename, saying m underscore master material. I will call it mat actually, so mat stands for material. Okay, great. Let it just save and compile. There you go. Now let's double click our material, which is the same as like before, and we're gonna do some changes here. We have already exposed our color tint as a parameter. For now, what we're gonna do actually to make it as a default value, which would be some around totally white. Let's just go to the color picker and make it totally white and just leave it as a, so at the moment tint is totally white. We have the tiling size, which was 1 by default, which is correct. We're not gonna change it actually. However, now we're gonna expose our textures as parameters. Yes, we can expose textures as parameters as well. The process is pretty simple. Right click, convert to parameter. Now converting to parameter, let's say we'll call it diffuse texture, which will be the base texture. Then the next one, I think what we have is roughness. Convert to parameter and say roughness. And the last but not least, actually we're gonna have our normal texture also converted to parameter. As you can see, we have created all of these three textures as set of parameters. Let's apply and see what is the change in our instance which we created out of the master material. So go to content browser and find out where is our instant. Master material mat is the one which we created. That's the master underscore floor for that. So one of the things you can see that you can create your instances based on the asset names which you might have. So this one is at the moment is floor. Maybe tomorrow you will have something else. In the coming details, we'll also go into 3D assets getting imported from external to our Unreal Engine, and there you will have a different set of name for the instance. So that's a very nice way of managing your material itself. So let's go over and open the instance. So if you open the instance, you can see here that we have diffuse texture, we have normal texture, we have roughness texture. So let's just enable them, each of them, and okay, so I'll just try to undock it, go back here, and once undock, I want to change basically the texture for this particular floor. So rather than going to the master material and doing the changes there, I would just go here and select any of the other textures which might be available. So let's see, I have like wood texture which is available here. So T underscore wood oak D basically stands for diffuse. So let's just select it, and there you go. You see here that the texture for the wood has been applied. However, you can also see that you see the tiles as well. And why the tiles are being showed? Because you still are using the normal map of the previous textures which we were using for the tiles. So to change this one, let's go and T underscore wood and select basically oak underscore N, which stands for normal, and there you go. So now what you see here is that an easy way of using the master material and automating the process of selecting the textures instead of creating new materials for every other asset which you're going to start filling up in your world. So let's say tomorrow we're going to have multiple assets. You don't have to actually go through the process of creating this kind of a material for every other asset from the starting. In fact, you're going to use the master material and use it as an instance for and create an instance for that particular asset and use it on your particular 3D model which you're going to import. We're going to go into details and how these things work. For now, I'll just revert back to basically back to the original textures, and just leave it like that and just save it. So as of now we have underscore floor instance for our floor, and now we are gonna go to the next process, which is how to basically import any of the 3D objects from outside Unreal Engine. So now let me take you to the process of how we're going to import any 3D asset from our external world. I have already one of the 3D asset which I have downloaded from online along with its textures. Definitely we'll be giving you the link within the course to basically download these assets as well as you go along with understanding the tutorials and also running the example. So let's just open it and go to the content browser. I would like to actually create basically under the content a new folder and call it crate. So in this crate, what we're going to do actually, we're going to bring our wood crate into this folder by simply picking up from your folder and dropping it in the crate folder in Unreal Engine. Once you bring it, most of the information which you have here is very much by default. You don't have to actually change anything out of it unless there is something very complex. And at the top there is something called build nanite. I will take you through the nanite technology, which is actually part of the Unreal Engine 5, and how this is going to really help you out in terms of actually designing your levels and not really thinking of how much memory your system is going to use. So for now, I'm not gonna select it as a build nanite. I'm just gonna import our crate in this case. When you go to the import material method, let's just select do not create material, okay, and let's say import. You will get this warning most of the times, no smoothing group information, but just ignore it. It's not a big deal in this case. Okay, so let's see what do we have. So we have a wood crate imported successfully. Double click on it, and there you go, guys. We have a 3D asset which we can use in our Unreal Engine for any of the purpose, regardless if it is going to be gaming, 3D environment creation, or interaction creation, which you're gonna do in the further we go down in the line of this tutorial. You see here at the moment there is no textures applied for it. So let's go to our folder where we have our initial 3D asset, and we have our wood crate base, wood crate metallic roughness, normal. What we need is actually a base color, a normal, and a roughness. And why do we need it? Because we already have this in our material as parameters. So going to the content folder again, going to the create folder, select these three and import into the same folder. There you go. So now we have imported. Okay, first things first, let's go and check each of our texture if it's imported correctly. So let's go to wood, create diffuse. Basically RGB is on, correct. This is what we needed. Next one is our roughness. Click on it. RGB should be unchecked because that's a map. We're going to use it as a map, as a mask basically. Then we're going to go to our normal map and just check it and see if everything, yes, RGB is unchecked and this normal map is being as normal map being imported, and that's how it should be. Great. So let's go back to our tutorial game development, and this is where we had our master material. Okay, I would like to create another instance of it. Create material instance. This time I'm gonna call it m underscore create inst for instance, and I'm gonna drag this particular instance into our create folder, just so that we can have everything in one place. Okay guys, now if we open our particular create again, let's try to actually bring it in our world rather than just opening it like that. Let's just put it here, and there you go. So this is our 3D asset which we imported out from externally to the Unreal Engine. Let's see what we can do. Let's just scale it up like 2. Okay, there you go, and scale up in all the axes itself. And now comes the time that what material do we need to apply to this particular asset. So we had it, our m underscore create material instance. That's what we're going to use it. You can, however, click on it, go back to your asset, select it, and when you have this arrow here, if you click on this one, whatever material you have selected here will automatically be assigned to our asset. So let's click like this, and there you go. Now what you see here guys is a bunch of asset, bunch of texture which is being shown, and this texture is basically not the texture of the crate. It's basically showing the tiles underneath, which is basically in the master material as default, which has been, we created it as default, and default textures were these. So, however, now we can override them using our create instance. So let's go back into the create instance, and okay, let's find it out, double click, and there you go. Now just follow me on this one. We have our diffuse texture, our normal texture, our roughness texture. Check out what were the names for the texture is. Wood crate underscore base color. So let's go and find out where do we have this wood. Okay, there's wood crate underscore base color. There you go. We have our first texture applied. We go to wood crate underscore, what was it, normal. This normal is applied, and we go to a roughness, wood crate, and select roughness. Fine. So what you see here actually is a set of textures being applied. However, if you see here, there's a lot of mess up in terms of the tiling. So let's go back up and say tiling size, and try to maybe decrease it. Well, no, let's try to increase it. Okay, yeah, that's how it works. So let's say 3 is the one, and if you see here now, you can see that our texture is being applied of the crate itself. I'll try to make it like maybe 2.5. let's see if 2.5, well, 2.5 is also, or maybe 3.3. Yep, that fits our texture very well, and you can see that our crate has been having a texture which we brought in by importing these ones, and it has successfully applied it, and it looks quite realistic as well as in terms of the textures which we have applied. Now if we can save it, and if we want to bring another wood crate in it and just place it, you will see that the textures are not applied. Why is that actually? Okay, I'll tell you. Now once we bring something into the world itself, so the textures which are being applied at that moment, which is basically the material which is being applied, it only applies to this particular copy of the asset. However, this one still doesn't have by default anything in it. So how we can actually apply a default material to it, so that anytime you want to bring this particular asset into world, it has the same texture all over whenever it is going to be copied. You go back, double click, and once you double click, you will see here the properties of our particular asset. At the right corner itself, go back to the content browser, select the m_crate, and just click this particular icon to assign it. There you go, as simple as that. Now save it, close it. I'll just close the instance as well, and now you can bring as much as crates you want on your particular scene, and all of them will have the same particular texture which is being driven by the master material. And if you want to change anything out of it, actually even the color around things, you can, all what you need to do is to go to the instance of this particular crate which is as applied as a default. Let's say double click on it, here it is, and one of the parameters which we had it here was actually the color tint. If you see, we already given it a white as a default, so let's just click on it, have a color picker, and there you go, as simple as that. And with one master material you can automate the process of any textures for any material for any of the assets. And this wraps up our basically how we can create instances, how we can create materials, how we can utilize master materials to really automate and ease the process of overall development in your particular game itself. So let's move forward and try to basically see how we can actually bring in and import 3D assets from other projects. Because the point is that if you're going to make the project and every time you're going to create new assets, that's not a very agile process of how game development works. When in game development, you mostly need readily available assets, game ready assets which are freely available from the market itself, or you can even buy from the market itself. So for this current tutorial, what I have already created some assets which we can bring in our current project. To have the assets bring into this particular project from another project, there is a process called migration, and I'll show you how the migration works. To get the other assets, you obviously require another project, and I have already created these folders with these assets will be provided along with the course for you to download in a zip format, and you will be certainly having these 3 folders after you unzip. So specifically, there is a project called Intro Unreal Project Introduction. Let's go and open it and see what we have, what kind of assets we have in it, and what kind of stuff is available which we can use and import basically into our current project which we are working on and we have created the materials in. So let's open the project, and it's just opening the project as of now. Okay, there you go. So we have a project is opened. Now if we go to the content browser of it, we can see there is a light map example folder under the content folder. It has certain maps in it which has a lighting aspect of it. It has some materials also in the folder itself. There are some 3D assets, meshes, chairs, and other stuff which we can use and bring in our game development process. And of course, some textures based on which the materials are created. So now, what we need to do is to basically export the lighting. I'm sorry for the, I have a sore throat today. Anyways, so we have a lighting examples. This is the folder we're going to migrate, and the migration process is very simple. You right click over it, right mouse click, and you scroll up and you select here migrate. Once you click the migrate, you will see it will show you the screen, basically showing that everything under the lighting examples folder, which is basically maps, materials, meshes, textures, everything is checked. All of the stuff which is there is going to be exported to whichever project you want to. In our process, as of now, we're going to migrate into our this project which we have been currently working on. So in this case, we're gonna just click OK, and it's gonna ask that where exactly you want this particular assets to be migrated. To do that, let's go back to our project. In our project, go to the content drawer, and on the content, right click and show in Explorer. You will see here it's open in show in Explorer, and it will show you the drive and on your PC where this particular project is created. All what you need to do is to just copy the particular point where the location where your current folder project is. Go back to your project from where you want this to be migrated, paste it, and be careful that always remember that all the assets should be migrated in the content folder of the project where you want these assets to be. After that, select folder. Does not appear to have many be a game folder. Migrated content will only okay. Okay, I guess I copied another format actually. So it was game tool and content and select folder. There you go. So let's go back to our original project, and let's try to make a little bit space here. And here you can see that we have successfully migrated light examples folder from that particular project to this particular project, and all of our assets which were there have successfully migrated along with the textures and everything here. This is the way you can have different kind of assets from different projects which you might have been working before, or you have downloaded from online from Unreal Engine Marketplace, and you want to import it in your particular folder. This is how the migration process works on. So moving forward, I'll take you a little bit on in terms of the lighting types and what is Lumen, which is native to Unreal Engine 5 specifically, and we'll move forward from that point onwards. So let's move forward, and we'll work on and try to explain basically the lighting system which is available in Unreal Engine. To move forward, before we go into details, Unreal Engine 5 came up with a very new way of lighting, of global illumination within your scenes, which is basically the real-time lighting and how the lighting affects overall to different assets within the Unreal Engine viewport, as well as the world which you are creating. Lumen is basically is a real-time rendering of the lighting, where you don't actually have to bake the lights. Baking light means that the system is going to calculate. Let's say you have a crate here, and if this was not a Lumen system, then you have to bake the light, and then it will start showing the shadows here. To give a proper example for this one, let's go into our content browser, and we'll go to the maps. And in the maps, I think we have light bounce as the map for which we want to use to give an example of what the lighting in terms of lumen means in Unreal Engine 5. Previously in Unreal Engine 4, the lighting system was basically baking the light at particular point in order to create the shadows, and a lot of different effects had to be given to give that kind of a look to overall system and your overall game itself. Okay, so we have the map open here now, and if you see here, it's a very simple map itself, where we have two just objects, a small room and a light. And if you look in the details itself of the post-process volume which is added here, let's go back, go down and look into our global illumination. At the moment it is none. So we have none actually here. If we click lumen, then we have a different system, and I'll just take you forward in the point at the moment. So now, in previous versions, this is how the light used to be. The shadows were very sharp and very hard as well, and normally this is not how the lights are supposed to be in real world. And lumen came in and changed everything for it. So to give an example that how this used to work before, because I think it's good to understand what previous versions were doing and how different it is in Unreal Engine 5 for game developers. So let's go to the build and click build all levels. What it will do, it will basically build the levels by baking the light here, and it will create the shadows based on the lighting calculation within this room, and it will show the lighting in there. So exporting lighting, navigating, building the light. Let's just give it a time. It's a very small level, it should be over by now, and so 100% over, and there you go. So now you see that once you have baked the level, you see the lighting, it has created the shadows for the objects, and wherever there was light it was reflecting, and it gives a good impression, but the problem with the previous version was this, that as soon as you select one of the objects and you move, you don't see the shadow moving. Why? Because Unreal Engine has baked it, and baked it at that point when the light was there, and it created the shadow for this particular object at that point. Now when you move it, there is no reflection, there is nothing happening to that one. That is the downside of how the particular what you call previous versions used to do. Even if you select the light itself, you can see that light is moving and you can see the shadow, but what you see also is that it's casting two shadows. One is the baked light here, other one is the light which at the moment is green, which is not actually a real light itself. So now, to give you an example that how this whole thing works without baking and using the lumen system, we need to go to our world settings here. Under the world settings, I think one of the point which I just need to check exactly for the baking, let's go scroll down. Okay, game on light mask. Okay, so we can find it actually under advanced, and saying the property which needs to be there is force, should be force here, place cells. Okay, I think it's advanced here, force no pre-occupied lighting. So selecting this one actually will remove our the baking process which we did before. So the baked part will be removed, and we'll come back to the original state which was. What we need to do is to just build all levels again, and there you go. Now once we are back, let's go to our process volume, and here we're going to go to the illumination. Let's go to the details of the process volume. We're gonna go back and scroll down, reflections method, at the moment none, select lumen, and there you go. So now if you see here, lumen is in effect with all the global illumination which is going on in our scene at the moment. Now if I select my object and move, the shadow moves along with it. Everything is happening in a real-time sense. You can even see that when in real form, you can have a tint of the scene of the screen here exactly on the object, Let's select one of the light itself and move around, and let's see how it goes. So everything is working fine. You can see here there is somewhere here we can see there's called preview. In order to remove it, I'll just go to the show, go to the visualize, and uncheck preview shadow indicators. There you go. So now there's nothing more into it. And this is how our global system, global illumination is very handy when it comes to lumen. You can easily place it, and your lighting part can easily do all the aspects of it, and you get the lighting which you really need for your game. So your screen, your scenes could look really good, and in terms of its immersiveness, and the users can get a more engaging experience of it. We'll go over the little bit of of different types of lights also. So the current one which you're seeing here is actually a point light, which you can actually bring in by going back here into this and go to lights and point light. Bring a point light, another point light here, and you just press it here. So let me remove it. Go to the properties of this point light on the right panel, and here you can actually increase and decrease the intensity, the overall intensity of your light itself. So let's see what information do we have. Okay, and source radius, source length. So source radius will allow you actually to basically, if you scroll out, this is your source radius. This is how far the light is actually going. You can increase and you can decrease it actually. You can even go to the point where you have intensity of the light itself. At the moment is 3, so let's say 1, and there you go. Your light itself is very low in the room itself. We can increase it, let's say make it 6. Very bright light, 3. You can go to the light color, and light color will actually, you can give a tint to it, whatever you feel you want to give basically. Light attenuation radius. My apologies, basically the first one was source radius, that I will come back to, and source radius and describe you about that one. Attenuation radius is actually this radius. So this is how far the light can go. So you can bring it down, and you can make it very smaller, and to just reflect on the assets which are just close by. So here you see that your light radius is only reflecting and affecting on this parts of the overall what you call scene itself. You can however increase the intensity, let's say 8. It might increase, but then the light is not actually going out of this particular attenuation rate itself. The second light type is actually, if you go to light and you go to light itself, and you can say a spotlight. Spotlight, as the name says, it has a cone reflection for the light itself. Let me just disable this light for now. By the way, you can click on any of the object, go into your right panel, and you can hide it or unhide it. So at the moment I'm just going to hide it actually, just to give an understanding of how the spotlight works. So spotlight at the moment, if you can see, it's just a directional light. It was just put shedding the light on the bottom, on the lower side. You can however change the rotation of it as you like, that's doable. And in this particular light itself, you have two different areas which you can increase and decrease to basically increase the intensity and overall coverage of the light itself. The inner cone is very much understandable, which is basically the inner that you have. If you see here, if you move here, you can see there are two types of cones which are reflecting, and one is called inner cone and one is outer cone. Let me just move back and and have it like the outer cone, and this is the outer cone increase which you are doing. And if you see here, as you move in and out, the light itself, the area it is going to cover is getting decreasing and increasing. Let's go to the inner cone angle and let's try to increase that one. This will further add up to the overall intensity of the light itself, where it is going to bounce. So these two options are really good in terms of how the light should reflect. If you just move closer to the object, you see that the shadows are quite harsh actually in this case. In reality, we should have a softer kind of, what you call the shadows. So here what we can do with the things which are available to us, the properties, source radius, soft radius. So source radius, let's say we increase source radius to 100, for example's sake. There you go, straight away. Your shadows are much softer than before. I can make it up to 300, let's say, just for example. Well, it's not reflecting much actually in this case. Sometimes it does actually. So let's have 200. Okay, and increase and decrease the cone. Okay, same is the case here. If you see, there are much softer shadows available here. Soft source radius is another property which you can increase, and so let's say 400, and let's see what results we get a much finer, much softer shadows here. This is how you can control the overall bouncing of the light from one object to another object. You give it an the shadows which you really need in your particular game. See, your game is, regardless of whatever kind of interactivity you will produce in your game, as long as you don't have a good immersive looking, an engaging looking environment, uh, you won't be having your users really getting engaged and really enjoying and having fun with your game. So that's how these tutorials are actually being aligned, so that we move forward taking step by step, so that you can understand that by the time when you will start putting your interactive elements into it by using blueprints, you will get a much better understanding, much faster way of development, rather than just having interactivity and then thinking of your levels. There is another light I want just now to show exactly. You can say light, it's called rectangular light, as the rectangular, and the shape of the light itself is rectangular. You can, let me see why it's not showing. Okay, there it is showing. Okay, we have it here, and where is the light? There you go. So it's rectangular. I'll hide the spotlight for now. So as you can see, the light is being shed from one source of the rectangle, one side basically, and it's in this way. You can actually rotate it as you like. Okay, this is how it's the same. And by the way, at the same time, you can increase the height and the width of the overall rectangular light. So let's say we have a width itself and we want to increase it, so it will basically cover and increase the area of the coverage of the light. You can increase the source height, which will again cover most of the area. If you can see, as we are moving further away from the actual size of it, it is reflecting on the other sides of the ball itself. Of course, you can have its own intensity. One of the things which is basically indirect lighting intensity, you can have a check and see that how much of light which is indirectly bouncing from one surface to another has to be there. So if you see that if you increase basically this part, certain areas which were actually darker are now much lighter up. You can increase more and then have a very bright light, or you can have it little less and then actually could go totally zero. So this is by default, and if you increase, this is how you're gonna. So these kind of tips are going to be very handy for you, and it's gonna give you real understanding of how levels are made in Unreal Engine. By the way, there we have attenuation rate here as well, so we can decrease it just to cover up that okay which part of it. So this property is basically in all the lights which are available in Unreal Engine, and they all work in the same manner, in the same aspect itself. So we're gonna move forward with the other aspects of Unreal Engine after this particular thing.